I don't eat salad. I don't eat vegetables. I don't let my kids eat vegetables. Plants are trying to kill you.
If you've been watching, you know that I take my ingredients very seriously, but there are 3 companies that I have found that I absolutely love. Check the description for discount codes. Hello, welcome to today's show. My name is Adrienne. Today I have with me Dr. Anthony Chaffee. No introduction is really needed, but he is a doctor. And are you still in a neurosurgical residency program, or what is the neurosurgical part?
Yeah, so I work as a neurosurgical registrar, is what it's called here. So it's a bit different because you can work sort of as like a neurosurgical resident registrar without being on the official training program. So because I didn't have permanent residency, I haven't been able to actually go on the official training program. But I've been doing the same job since 2020. So yeah, I work in neurosurgery and I also have a private practice in sort of addressing metabolic health issues.
Wow. So on top of all the things you do in our community, you are actually in the hospital and practicing.
Mhm.
That
Yeah,
is
yeah,
amazing. Do you
yeah,
sleep? How much sleep do you get?
not much. No, not much. So it's like I'm usually, from first thing in the morning until 11, 12 at night, I'm working, doing consultations or interviews. Like today, I probably won't finish until well after 11 p.m. And it's just back to back to back. So I'm trying to fit in things like this in the morning, and then I have to go see my patients, and I'll be at my office for the day, and then I come straight back, and I have sort of 2 more interviews after that will go to 11 or later.
Wow. So it's no wonder if anybody
Mhm.
has ever seen you and your girlfriend in real life, you guys are so mushy, and it must be because that time is so precious together.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. Yeah.
Okay. So where are you originally from?
I grew up in Southern California, around Santa Barbara, and then we moved up to Kirkland, Washington, just outside of Seattle when I was 9 and a half. And that's where my family sort of is now, is in the Washington state area.
If you could pick the most optimal place on earth to live, where would it be?
I get, just for, my own sort of nostalgia, I would say Santa Barbara again. Yeah, every time I go there, I just love it there. It's just gorgeous weather. It's a gorgeous area. Still have family there. And California is a bit weird right now, with these excessive taxes and onerous sort of
Weird.
regulations. So it's weird. And Santa Barbara is sort of its own little pocket. It hasn't been it's still sort of largely the same, but there's a lot of weird regulations and taxes and things that are there, and it sort of is a bit of a pain to deal with. But just as like a location, I always still love Santa Barbara. But then a place that would be more nice to live and have sort of be. I like things that are just a little less regulated. I just like to be able to live my own life and not have everything that I've worked for taken away by a bunch of politicians that then go and waste it on making themselves rich. That kind of bugs the hell out of me. So different sorts of places like Texas or a place like that, or would be nice too. I like the warm. I'd love to be around my
Mhm.
family up in Washington, and it does have nice weather there in the summer, but it's a lot of rain, and Seattle's crazy. And so,
Crazy. My
definitely.
husband just went through there. He said the airport is nuts and it's crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you ever watch TV?
Pretty rarely, I just really don't have time, so I'm
Yeah.
typically working until, like, 11 or 12, and then I'm, like, in bed, going through emails and messages and responding to things that I just don't have time to do during the day, because I'm just so busy with patients and doing, seeing patients or doing interviews. It's a lot of my day, and so I
Well,
can't actually get back to the messages until the middle of the night.
we want to know if you could watch or listen to a YouTube channel or a podcast, what would it be?
I like listening to Thomas Sowell. I like listening to Thomas Sowell books, like books on tape or his interviews and things like that. So often I'll listen to those, like in the car or driving, or when I'm like lifting weights and working out. I'll try to listen to a book on tape, and sometimes a different podcast will catch my attention. Like the Doctor Death series. That was super interesting, and I have multiple series of that, of different doctors that were just monsters, and hurt a lot of people. And I'll see different people's podcasts or YouTube um, interviews, come up, and they're interesting to me. Some Dr. Baker's doing something, Dr. Barry, Dr. Kiltz, Dr. Paul
Mm.
Mason. Always like watching his videos whenever they come out. And, so I'll sort of pick and choose those if something comes up that's interesting. And then when just driving, I try to listen to books on tape. So at the moment, I'm going back over history on Genghis Khan and the Mongol horde. And it was, Jack Weatherford's like Genghis Khan and the changing of the modern world. Is it changing? Well, something like that. Anyway, it's a great book. It's really, really, really interesting. And that was a really interesting guy and people. They were all carnivores. They just ate a whole bunch of meat and fermented dairy products and blood. And they conquered the known world. There's the largest contiguous empire that's ever existed, and they were just so much better. And they say specifically in the book that they were so much better fed and nourished. They were all eating protein and meat. That they were doing so much better than the peasant armies that they were fighting. They were eating a bunch of gruel and grains, and they said specifically the gruel and grains caused bone and health issues, and they were just weaker, sicker people, and they just didn't last well in war, and so they just got trounced. So those are sort of the things I try to do when I have time. It's usually just driving.
Yeah, I mean, I have kids like screaming all the time. So mine is like if I'm working out, I get to listen to something and I just
Mhm.
love to absorb that information. I haven't watched TV in years. I can't believe
Yeah.
anybody still does that. What attracted you to carnivore? Is it because you were researching optimal health for 20 years, or how did you stumble on this? I totally forget.
Well, I really literally did stumble on this. I was taking nutrition classes, and I was you know taking botany and biology and doing my pre-med classes. And I knew that plants defended themselves by being toxic. They go about chemical warfare to stop animals and insects from eating them. But then you forget that you're told that plants are all toxic and use these different defense mechanisms to stop animals from eating them. And then you go home and get told to eat your vegetables, and it's just like, and you just have this disconnect. And but I had a professor of cancer biology in college who was talking about the plant toxins that were actually in the foods that we eat and how they could actually be carcinogenic. It was a cancer biology class. And so he was going on about that, and how all these different vegetables had multiple carcinogens, actually dozens of carcinogens, or even over 100 carcinogens in things like Brussels sprouts and mushrooms. And we were very blown away by that. And I remember just looking around wildly, like someone's got to be in on the joke. It's got to be someone laughing. This has to be a joke. And no one was. Everyone was looking around, seeing how other people were reacting, see if someone was sort of laughing or trying to hold back a smile or something like that. And no one was. So eventually we sort of realized that he wasn't joking and he was serious. And I remember thinking to myself, well, but vegetables are still good for you though, right? And he just sort of looked at us and gave us a funny look. And he just said, I don't eat salad. I don't eat vegetables. I don't let my kids eat vegetables. Plants are trying to kill you. And I was like, right, screw plants. And I was like, that was it. And I just went to the grocery store after that class. I was just like, just wide eyed, blown away. And I was just walking around. I'm like, what the hell do I eat? Everything's plants. Everything has plants in it.
Mhm.
There's just nothing that doesn't have plants. And I just came around some eggs. And I was like, okay, eggs. Eggs don't come from plants. I'll get some eggs. And then meat. Meat doesn't come from eggs or come from plants. I'll get it. I'll get meat. And so I just ate eggs and meat. And I did that for years, and I never felt better. And some milk too. Milk doesn't come from plants, so I grabbed some milk. I didn't drink much milk, even though I liked milk. Mostly just ate eggs and meat, and just drank water. And I felt better than I ever had in my life. I stopped drinking at the same time, or around the same time during the rugby season. And so I thought that was why I was feeling so much better, is because I had stopped drinking. Of course, that did make a big difference. Also comes from plants, and so I didn't realize how big of an impact that just not eating plants had on my health and my performance. And 5 years later, when I was 25 playing rugby in England, I sort of slipped off of it because there was some of the meat was sort of had a bit of a breading, like a crumbing, and I sort of convinced myself that maybe it wasn't that big of a deal because dose makes the poison. And so it wasn't all that much. So it probably was fine. And yeah, a dose does make the poison, but the dose is that big. It's tiny. And it definitely affected me negatively. But the biggest thing that it did was it opened up the door to other options, because for 5 years I was just like, that's from a plant. No, I'm not eating it. I won't eat anything from a plant. And then all of a sudden I was like, well, maybe a little bit's okay. And so a little bit more started slipping in, but I never ate a processed food diet. I never ate a junk food diet. I was always a clean whole food diet, omnivorous diet, heavily meat based, but generally lean meats. And I would, cut off the fat and all that sort of stuff, and maybe have a bite or two out of like a guilty pleasure that, oh, I shouldn't have done that, but because we're told that the fat's so bad for you. But very meat heavy. And so I would typically, when I was cooking for myself, because my mom always cooked for us, and so I learned to cook from her. I never really ate out at restaurants, almost never. I mean, I probably had pizza every 2 years or something like that. I mean, it was just nothing, that was in my normal meal plan. And I was always very careful about what I ate. I didn't want to eat garbage. And so still just whole foods. And I would make a bunch of meat, chicken often, because that's chicken breast, supposed to be what athletes eat. And and then I would just add in some salad, because you're supposed to eat some stupid salad. And so I would do that, but I often didn't have carbs. I almost never bought bread, and didn't have any sugary things or all that sort of stuff. So it was always very clean, omnivorous, meat-based diet. But even just adding in a bit of vegetables and a bit of other sort of things, it just really took the shine off how it felt. At 25, I felt like a superhero. At 25 and a half, I did not. And I remember thinking to myself, why don't I feel as superhuman amazing as I normally do? Am I just not working as hard? Am I not pushing myself? Am I old now? Am I just like over 20, past 25? So I'm just dying now. And that's what I thought. I just chalked it up to age, but it was actually a pretty sharp decline. I mean, I felt literally like just superhuman amazing at 25, and then 25 and a half, I did not. And it wasn't for 13 more years that I realized that what I was doing was eating as our biological design dictated, which is where we've been apex predators for over 2 million years. Apex predators are by definition carnivores, and plants do have toxins. Meat doesn't. Meat has everything you need in the proportion you need it, and they don't have toxins unless you eat like a poison sack or something like that, or some feces or some sort of contamination. The meat itself is fine. And, because an animal has very strong defenses against being killed and eaten, but everything's trying to eat everything else in the wild. And, so animals have to be able to defend themselves. And so it's difficult to kill an animal, especially a big, large animal. Or even a small animal, because oftentimes small animals that will have venom, like snakes and things like that, because they're vulnerable. They're small animals. They're small creatures. They can be eaten by a lot of things. So they have to be, have a potent defense. And but if you get past those defenses and you are able to kill them, the meat itself is the most bioavailable and nutritious food on this planet. And so you just have to contend with different. So you can do that. You can contend with the natural kinetic defenses of an animal. But when you get it, it's perfect nutrition. Or you have to deal with the chemical toxic defenses of plants. Those are sort of the two options. And when I realized that, and I realized that we were just eating the wrong way, and that's how I was eating when I was in my early 20s. And I realized that, and I was always trying to figure out how to get back to feeling like that, because I just felt amazing. And I could never figure out how to get back to feeling that good. And until I was 38, and I just went, that was it. That's it. Like we are carnivores, and I was living as a carnivore and eating as a carnivore. And just like any animal at the zoo, they say that signs of the zoo say, don't feed the animals. It makes them very sick if they eat food that they're not designed to eat. We're animals too. And so that same rule applies to us. They say, don't feed the ducks at parks and things like that. It was one of the most ignored rules in the world. But feeding bread to ducks gives them diabetes and other sorts of chronic issues that we get, right? So why have we not put two and two together and realized that when animals get those exact same diseases, diabetes, obesity, cancers, autoimmunity, arthritis, osteoporosis, from eating the wrong food, and we get those exact same diseases, why aren't we putting two and two together and realizing that it's the food that's causing the disease? We see this in anthropology. We see pre-agricultural societies that are just eating predominantly meat, maybe some dairy, like in the case of the Maasai, and maybe some plants if they can't get the meat that they need. But in a lot of cases, when they have an abundant supply of meat, they haven't been taken off their land and things like that. Like the hods have been taken off their land and limited. They're not allowed to, they're normally hunt like giraffes and things like that, but that's like the national animal of Tanzania. They're not allowed to hunt it anymore. And this is like shit, so they have to hunt different animals. They're not able to hunt the big game. So they get smaller and smaller um, uh, animals, and they have to flesh that out with plants and honey. That's out of necessity, not out of biology. And so when you see these pre-agricultural societies and people transition into post-agricultural way of eating and life, you actually see a difference in the health outcomes. And this is anthropologists talk about this, whereas the pre-agricultural communities, the issues they deal with are like accidents, injuries, infections, and difficult childbirth and labor and infant mortality and things like that. And then when they go start eating differently, start eating in a post-agricultural fashion, then there's a shift in what issues they contend with. And the majority of problems they have are these so-called diseases of civilization, which used to be called Western diseases, which now we just call getting older. It's all the chronic diseases like diabetes and cancer and heart disease and all the rest. But it doesn't happen to people that are eating in a pre-agricultural way. This is a well-documented fact. And so that means the food is causing the disease, right? Because when they don't eat the food, they don't get the disease. And other people eat the food and other people get these diseases too, just at lower rates because, some people have had 10,000 years of agriculture in their past, and you become adapted. You become partially adapted, but you still get the diabetes, you still get the heart disease, you still get the cancer, you still get the autoimmunity now in greater and greater levels because we're eating worse and worse and worse, and we're eating things that have not existed for 10,000 years, that we have not been eating for 10,000 years, like excessive amounts of refined sugar and seed oils, which are seed oils are brand new. We have had no time flat to adapt to that. And so we're getting much, much, much sicker eating further and further away from our biological diet. And so, when you realize these things, nutrition becomes very, very simple. It's just like, what has a species been eating the longest? Well, that's what they're most adapted to. That's what they're most, better designed to eat. And you start adding in new things, and they'll get new problems. And we see these same problems happen in all different animals in the world. And it's not that hard. People just have to pay attention.
So, what about bugs? Because we know that other countries eat bugs. But
Mhm.
to me, I'm an ancestor and I'm looking around. I'm only going to eat a bug if I'm going to die. Like, what about
Mhm.
bugs?
Yeah, well, I mean that's certainly the case too. If you can get a buffalo, you don't need to eat bugs. But if things are a bit more harsh, like in the Australian outback, and you don't have access to big animals, or maybe you're just not having successful hunts or something like that. Widgety grubs and those sorts of things. Those can be good sources of nutrition. Crustaceans, those are basically sea bugs. You're getting like a lobster is basically an ocean bug, and crabs and things like that. They have this exoskeleton, and you're eating the inside. In different parts of Baja California, Mexico, or southern United States. The traditional populations would take tarantulas and just throw them on the fire and just roast them up, and then they'd just sort of eat them. And it's just like a tiny little crab meat, and just take out the fangs and the poison sacs, and you should be fine. I've heard they don't taste great, but I guess it's what you're used to. There's not much meat on a tarantula either, but there are cultures that do that. When you're talking about eating a lot of this stuff, people worry about the chitin is something that we can contend with in large amounts if we're just eating tons and tons and tons of it, or if that's the majority of what we're eating. I don't think we really know that one way or the other, but there's certainly people that say that it's safe and other people that say that it's not safe. But there are certainly people that have eaten bugs to augment their diet. Quite typically, it's in the places that have a difficulty getting larger animals and other types of meat. In fact, lobster used to be the poor man sort of diet in the New World, in the colonies and things like that. People that really couldn't afford to eat better quality food. Well, there's just the ocean is just teeming with lobster, and you can just get these sort of water bugs and cook those up. But it was a lower class sort of dish, and then it became, as people started realizing, it actually tastes pretty damn good, and so it became a delicacy and sought after. So it's funny how those things sort of change with the times. But if you can get bigger animals, then probably a good idea.
Okay, so my new carnivore friend, she's having issues working because of the loose stool issue. Is
Mhm.
there anything you can suggest for her to calm that down? I keep telling her just time, but she's a teacher and she can't be doing this all day.
Yeah. Well, excuse me. The thing is that there can be a lot of things that can cause loose stools. One's what people don't realize is that fiber actually slows down the motility of your digestion. It doesn't speed things up. It actually slows it down, causes a traffic jam. There's a lot of bulk, and it slows it down, and it gets in the way. And so when you take away fiber, sometimes things that can act as a mild laxative are much more effective now. And when you're blocking up your pipes with fiber, then having something that as a mild laxative can be very helpful. Or you can get backed up and constipated and have very difficult to pass stools. And that's the thing. The only experimental trials on constipation and fiber have actually shown so you can show a cause and effect relationship with, as opposed to epidemiology. The only experimental trials that have been done with fiber have actually shown that more fiber makes constipation worse, and that less fiber makes constipation better, and actually no fiber at all completely alleviated all symptoms of constipation and bloating and all these other sorts of things in this trial. And so that's one thing to remember. And so one thing that people do is they go carnivore, but what carnivore really means is you're only eating meat and you're only drinking water, and there is nothing else going into your body. Almost everybody drinks coffee. Almost everybody going carnivore keeps drinking coffee. Coffee's a laxative. And so when you get rid of the fiber, that laxative effect is going to be much more pronounced. And so people say, well, I'm still drinking the same amount of coffee, so that can't be it. Well, no, now it's having a greater effect because you're not eating the fiber. And so when you eat meat, 98% that gets absorbed, it liquefies, it's not solid, and then that coffee can actually push things through too quickly, and now that liquid all just comes out. Because when you're pushing out fiber, it's always going to be solid because it's indigestible. You can't break it down, but you do break down meat, and you make that liquid. And there's anybody thinking that, like, oh, you can't break down meat. Well, what's coming out? Is it liquid or what? Because like there's just chunks of undigested meat. It's liquid, right?
Yeah.
So um, there are things that are going to contribute to this. So coffee, tea, artificial sweeteners, generally in the coffee or the tea, magnesium supplements. And a lot of people that come into this will have other medical issues. They may have diabetes, and metformin and other medications can cause loose stools as well. So all of those things, if you're taking any of those things, you need to be mindful of that. And if you're drinking coffee, that's the first thing to cut out. You can even switch to like caffeine pills just to have a bit of the energy and not have as much of the laxative effect. You'll still get some from the caffeine, but it won't be nearly as much as the rest of the coffee, because there's 150,000 chemicals in coffee besides caffeine, right? And you just want the caffeine, and yet you're bringing in all these other ones as well. So those are things too. So if it's almost always someone's still drinking coffee, and they just get rid of that, it goes away. If someone's only eating meat and only drinking water, then it can be, like you said, it could just be like, the microbiome sort of changing over, and it just sort of will take a bit of time and it'll go away. But it can also be because you're having too much or too little fat. If your body has a limited capacity to absorb fat, and that's because of your bile. When you make bile, and that emulsifies fat, and then you absorb that in through your lymphatic system. Once you finish off your bile, and it takes a day to make about zero point 0.8 liters to 1 liter of bile in total. So it takes like 24 hours to make that much. So eventually you're going to run out. And so the fat after that you eat, you can't absorb it past a small amount, mostly MCTs, medium chain triglycerides. They can be digested and absorbed actually through your liver and not go through your lymphatics. So that bypasses the need for bile. But the rest of it really just goes out. And so that's what keeps your stool soft. So if you're ever constipated, by definition, meaning that you're getting dry, hard, constipated stools, because you only go like once or twice a week anyway, because you're absorbing 98% of the meat that you're eating. But if it's dry and hard and difficult to pass, that's by definition, you're not eating enough fat, because you're not getting enough fat excess in there to soften those up. But if you eat a lot more fat than your body can absorb, it'll come out in a liquid manner. And so you generally want to aim for about 1 to 2 grams of fat to every 1 gram of protein. So it's actually a lot of fat, but there can be more fat than your body can absorb. And people go, oh, you don't want to eat too much fat because, fat can make you fat. It doesn't really. There's really no such thing as too much fat, because you just don't absorb it. If you are just huffing in a bunch of isolated MCTs, or you're taking ox bile or something like that, forcing your body to absorb more fat than it wants, sure. But otherwise, just from a physiological standpoint, if you're just eating natural animal fats and meat and not taking any weird supplements, you'll just absorb the amount that your body wants, and the rest will go out. So it's like an overflow valve. And if you do a lot more, then you'll get diarrhea. I mean, that's it. That's what happens when you overeat fat, but you don't absorb it. So it's not harming you. And the other side of it is that, when I said you could get constipated if you're eating too little fat, sometimes you can get so constipated that it actually does cause a bit of a pseudo obstruction, and you have the liquid stool and you sort of start getting blocked up, and you get this liquid stool coming out of your small intestine, and actually isn't able to push that hard stool forward, and it's just like the liquid just squirts around the outside, and you get liquid diarrhea. And so you get watery diarrhea, and it's called spurious diarrhea or overflow diarrhea. And what that looks like is that you're getting watery diarrhea, and then every now and then you just get this boulder that comes out, and this difficult, hard sort of thing, and then it's back to liquid. And so you have to sort of differentiate, because he goes, oh yeah, I'm having diarrhea or whatever. It's just like, okay, but are you getting that pattern? Are you ever getting hard stools? And it's like, oh yeah, sometimes I'll get this rocky thing that will come out. But no, that's just diarrhea after that. That means you're so constipated that you're actually approaching an obstruction, and you need to really increase the fat that you're eating. And then the far extreme is if you're eating far more protein and getting far more calories from protein than from fat, it can actually be quite irritative to your gut, and you can actually cause liquid stools from that as well. So you have to sort of look at that. Are you eating or drinking any of those things that I mentioned? Coffee, tea, magnesium, artificial sweeteners, or medications like metformin. If you are, get rid of them, insofar as that you can with medication, etc. And if you're not, if you're only eating meat, only drinking water, then look at how much fat you're getting. If you're getting between 1 to 2 grams of fat to 1 gram of protein, okay, well, then you're probably getting enough fat. It's probably not too little fat. And if you're not ever getting the intermittent constipation, it's just sort of water or liquid diarrhea, or very, very soft running diarrhea, stools, then you're probably just eating more fat than your body can absorb, and you just sort of pull back on that. Sometimes rendered fat, so like the tallow or even butter, is going to go through quicker. If you're eating just the solid fat, then that will have more time to break down and slowly release the fat, so you can absorb that better. It doesn't just go out through your body. Those sorts of things can help as well. But if you're really not eating all that much fat, you're eating just lean meat, you're probably under eating fat, and that's why you're getting loose stools. So there's a lot of so it's sort of a long, complicated answer, but there's a lot of different possibilities.
That was really good. I've never heard about the absorbing of fat thing, because some people swear
Oh,
you
really?
can eat too much fat. But I just heard about that, how we only absorb 10% of it or something like that. So that's very interesting. Okay, so
After after you run out of bile, it's like 10% or less of the fat. Yeah. Before that, you can absorb more, but when you run out of bile, it's like less than 10% absorption, and most of that are MCTs.
so can carnivore help people with low bile, weak sphincter, and acid reflux?
Well, there's a lot of different sphincters in the body, so I sort of have to know which one they're talking about. But um, It can help in a lot of ways. It can help your body and your physiology just work more normally. A lot of people's bodies just work a lot better, and a lot of heartburn issues go away, and other little sort of things they didn't even realize were problems. They just thought that was just a normal sensation. They can just go away. Low bile, I would wonder how they sort of measured that. There's not really a great way to sort of measure that. When you unless you have like severe liver dysfunction, you should be making bile. Like if you have extreme cirrhosis or something like that, then sure, you may be under producing bile and other important things that your liver produces, like your clotting factors. But apart from that, you are probably making exactly the amount of bile that your body wants you to make, except that your body can adjust. If we're all sort of eating less fat than we need, and so our bodies, bile is an expensive resource, so it's not going to just try to keep making just tons of it. So it could very well lower the amount that it makes, and that's not. I don't know if we have any hard evidence of that, but there are people um, that seem to make more bile as they get more fat adapted, and their body starts understanding like, oh, okay, hey, look, we have fat again, and we can do this. So I would still just eat as much fat as your body can absorb, and just allow your body to do its thing. If you have actual liver disease and dysfunction, or pancreatic insufficiency, or something like that, then that's fair enough. You might need some help there, but that's going to be the exception, not the rule. Almost no one in the percentage of the population is going to be in that category. And so most people will be just fine, and you just eat fatty meat until it stops tasting good, and you eat enough fat to keep your stool soft but not runny, and you just go from there. Different sorts of sphincters. I mean, you have reflux. People find that their reflux often resolves because when you're eating carbohydrates, it raises insulin. Insulin affects over 100 different mechanisms and processes in your body. It does not just drive energy into cells. It's a very sophomoric understanding of insulin. It affects all sorts of different things. And one thing that it affects is how much acid your stomach produces. So you can actually become too acidic. We're normally very acidic stomachs. So it's like between 1.5 and 2.0 pH, which is down there with vultures and lions, because we're carnivores, and we're also scavengers as well. For a long time, we were just sort of eating whatever was there, and we had to contend with a high bacterial load, and not get sick from the bacteria. But if you're eating a bunch of carbs, that can raise your insulin. Well, that will raise your insulin, and that will lower your pH even further and become even more acidic, and so you can actually get gastritis and esophageal reflux disease as well, and Barrett's esophagus, these sorts of things. And I've seen a lot of people improve their reflux, and I've seen a lot of people improve their Barrett's esophagus as well, which is a precancerous change to the lower esophagus. Sometimes if people are still sort of struggling or having these sorts of issues, sometimes short-term medication can sort of help with that sphincter tone and the lower end of the esophagus, and stop the sort of the reflux. But then it's generally a temporary measure, because people after a few months tend to not need that. And so it just depends. But I'm assuming that's the sphincter they're talking about, but I'm not entirely sure. But it can improve your body in a lot of ways. And the thing is too, is that we're not fully aware of everything that it can do. We know a lot of things that it can do, especially with the research that's stemming from the high-fat meat-based ketogenic diets. And the carnivore diet is a high-fat meat-based ketogenic diet, but there are thousands of studies on just ketogenic diets using a high-fat meat-based approach, and we see massive improvements in various health outcomes. And so those we can say very safely that a carnivore diet would help with, because they're ketogenic diets. And but there's a lot of other things that we're just discovering, and people are recovering from things that we're just like, wow, that's kind of amazing, like congestive heart failure. People are going on a ketogenic carnivore diet, and their ejection fraction goes from below 15 up to completely normal, and off their medications. That's insane. I mean, people just circle the drain and get worse and worse and worse. Have horrible quality of life. They can die. It's very, very dangerous. There's a high morbidity and mortality rate. And then, if it gets bad enough, you need to get a heart transplant. Maybe you don't get it in time, and you die. And all of a sudden you just change what you're eating, and all of a sudden you have no problem at all, and your heart works fine. It's amazing. I mean, it's absolutely mind blowing. So, I'm hoping to put together some case studies, case series, and get people on that to publish that. So if anybody, has reversed congestive heart failure, for instance, email me at anthonychaffee@gmail.com and put that in the subject. And if you want to be part of that um, case series. So, we're seeing amazing things. The best thing to do is just try it yourself. And so see if is it going to help with your specific issue? Maybe there's a lot of evidence that will help with a lot of different things. And so if it's one of those specific things, I can tell you, whether we have evidence that it will or won't. But there's a lot of things that we're still gathering information on, and there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that should be taken for what it is, which is anecdotal. But at the same time, if you do it and you have that same experience, that's the only thing that matters. That anecdotal N of one experience is your life. And so if that happened for you and that benefited you, that's the only thing that matters. And it doesn't matter if it works for other people, it worked for you. So give it a try. There's certain things, it depends on what's causing things. You can have problems that don't stem from diet, although a lot of things stem from diet. And so you could fix your diet, and that can help you in a lot of ways, but it's not going to necessarily fix everything, because not everything is caused by a bad diet. It's not gonna all of a sudden reverse a broken arm or something like that. It's just like, well, you broke your arm in another way. It'll help you heal. It'll help your body be better and heal faster and stronger from that broken arm, but it's not going to undo the break. I mean, so there are other things that can damage your body. So just give it a try and see what happens. It will help with a lot of things. It's not going to help with everything, but that's what trial and error is for.
That's amazing. My grandma has congestive heart. Ever since she had it, she's basically been
Mm.
in a chair. Prior to congestive
Yeah.
heart, she was hunting, she was gardening, she was moving. After congestive heart, her quality of life has completely gone down. So I'm going to share this with my family and
Sure.
say, let's get grandma some more meat. She loves her meat. But that
Yeah.
brings me to she rejects a lot of meat, saying it's going to flare her gout.
Oh, yeah. So that's something we've been told for a long time. But the funny thing there is that the treatment for gout in the 1800s was beef and water diet. And so Dr. Salisbury was what the Salisbury steak is named for. He was a New York doctor in the 1800s who did a 30-year research project into optimal nutrition for human beings, and he found that people that were eating plants were getting diseases that other people simply weren't. And this is long before processed food industry and seed oils and the massive increase in junk food sugars and things like that. And he found that people just eating more grains and vegetables and less meat were getting these diseases. And so he found he could cure them by putting them on a pure red meat and water diet. And looking at the Native Americans just eating bison largely throughout the year, and they were not getting any of these diseases. They were living to be 110, 115 or older as very fit, healthy adults. And it's wildly different than what we have been led to understand. Gout is an interesting one because there's actually 5 different causes of gout. It's not just uric acid. So uric acid, forming crystals in the joints, that's traditionally thought of as gout. But up until the early 2000s, there were 5 causes of gout, uric acid crystals in the joints only being one of them. Now, uric acid is called gout, and the other 4 are called pseudo gout. But the thing is, they look exactly the same. The clinical presentation is identical. The only way to differentiate between those 5 is if you stick a big old needle into that hot, swollen, painful joint and take an aspirate out. No one does that because it's extremely painful. And who cares? Oh, it's probably just uric acid
Just
crystal. So
gout.
you give them
Yeah.
colchicine and it may work, it may not, and you don't know. And it just sort of just settles down on its own eventually. Colchicine has an anti-inflammatory effect, so it's going to sort of help with the pain anyway, whether or not it actually helps with the gout itself or the pseudo gout. Oxalates are another known cause of gout, or now termed pseudo gout. And again, there are 3 more in the bargain. There's a very poor concordance and correlation with serum uric acid levels. So you take your blood test. Oh, uric acid's like, oh, gout. No, it's actually a very weak association and correlation between uric acid levels in the bloodstream and uric acid crystals in the joints. So they don't actually translate very well. There are people that have very high uric acid in their blood, never get gout. And there are people that have very low serum uric acid levels, and they're plagued with it, right? So it's actually a very, very low association. When you go on any ketogenic diet, as you are fat adapting, uric acid levels tend to go up. And we aren't seeing this massive uptick in gout in people that are going ketogenic or people going on ketogenic carnivore diets. And again, that's because there's not a cause and effect relationship there. It's actually a very weak association. But the reason that uric acid levels go up temporarily is because when you're not fat adapted, you start making ketones so your body can run on them. But they aren't able to be utilized as well because you haven't been using ketones, you haven't been making ketones, and so you don't have all the different sort of receptors there and ready to go to absorb and utilize all this energy, and so you end up peeing it out. And this is why people can measure ketones on a urine strip. That doesn't happen after a few months because you stop peeing it out because your body starts using it. So you start turning on different genes that express different receptors so that you can actually pull in and utilize ketones better. And when you're not able to do that, your blood ketone levels are a lot higher, which actually suppresses inflammation. So that's not a bad thing. And then you actually spill these out in your urine, and uric acid is actually boxed out by in the urine. So we actually will replace that out. And so that's actually, you can actually measure like how keto adapted you are based on your uric acid levels in your blood. And so as we have multiple studies showing that, they'll go up initially and then they'll just start coming down and down and down. And after sort of 4 or 5 months, you're sort of back down at normal levels. And people aren't getting gout from that. People who have suffered from gout sometimes get a flare up or two. You can certainly take medications for these things. It may or may not be from uric acid crystals, but some people tend to have a flare up or two, and they stick with it, and it goes away, and it doesn't come back. That's the typical pattern and presentation of people that have had gout that are going onto a ketogenic carnivore diet or just a ketogenic diet with a lot of meat. And so I understand that she's a bit concerned about that, but gout is really brought about by alcohol and fructose more than anything, and you're cutting that stuff out of your diet, and so it tends to go away. So a lot of people with gout, there are a lot of forums, there's a lot of groups, and there's a lot of people that have gout and have suffered with gout and have done this, and you can see their experiences, and you see a lot of people say, yeah, I never had a gout flare up again, or people say I have a flare up or two and then it's gone and it never came back. Those sorts of things. They're again oxalates, so if people are oxalate dumping, they can get what seems to be gout, but again, it looks exactly the same as uric acid and the other three. The only way to tell is sticking a needle in your joint. And so someone's getting sort of gout pains a year or two after they go in. It's like, all right, well, your uric acid isn't a problem anymore. You're keto adapted, and why is it just causing a problem now? Why wouldn't it have caused a problem right away if meat was causing gout? But you can have different flare-ups because you can start oxalate dumping. You're storing these oxalates in different cells and tissues, and then sometimes for some reason they just start really pouring out in much higher quantities and potentially affect your joints as well. It's all theoretical. Again, no one's sticking needles in these joints because they just, it hurts. And so we don't actually know what the hell is going on when someone has an attack on that. It's all supposition. But either way, if you're only eating meat and only drinking water, you should not get uric acid crystal gout, at least in the long run anyway.
Okay, last question. Everybody I know is losing their gallbladder.
Mhm.
Why? And can the carnivore diet save your gallbladder?
The reason people, and I think this is very, very clear from looking at the physiology of our bodies, that the reason people are losing their gallbladders is because they're not eating enough fat. And, like I said, we have a limited capacity to absorb fat because we make bile, and bile is what helps us absorb fat. It's an expensive material. It takes a lot of energy and a lot of expensive resources to make bile because fat is very important. If fat weren't important and it just harms us and damages us, why would we have 5 organs all working together to absorb fat? Stomach starts to break it down. Liver makes bile. Gallbladder stores it and concentrates it, and that's very important. The pancreas makes lipase and other digestive enzymes that break it down. Small intestine absorbs it. So you have 5 organs all working together to absorb fat. If you didn't have any of those things, if you had like, one of those things that not working properly, you just don't absorb it. It just goes out, right? And so everything has to be working very well, all pistons firing for you to absorb fat. So if this is just some sort of poison, why the hell would our bodies be working so hard to get in our body? It's not a poison. It's one of the most important and valuable nutrients that exists in nature. And so your body's working very hard to bring it in. When you don't eat fat, because we're told that you shouldn't eat fat because it's bad for you and makes you sick and give you heart disease and cancer and diabetes and make you obese and all this stuff, because we look at fat and we say, ooh, I ate fat and then I put on fat. No, you ate carbs. So you put on fat because it changed your hormones and jacked up your insulin, and insulin forces you to store fat and not use energy. It slows down your metabolism and actually causes you to store fat instead of burning fat. And if your insulin is too high, you will not burn an ounce of fat. You can't. You have to keep bringing in food through your mouth and carbs through your mouth in order to have energy. And then you just keep storing it, storing it, storing it. You use some of it and you store the rest. And so you just keep getting more and more obese. When you are eating fat, then you use that bile. When you're not eating fat, that bile goes into your gallbladder. And like I said, it concentrates. And the physiology textbooks talk about how it can concentrate normally up to 20 times the concentration. So you can have 20 days worth of bile sitting there, hyper concentrated. And so because, predators don't always eat every day, they can't get a kill every day. Herbivores do. They're generally just grazing and just eating, whatever plant that they're eating. They're just eating and migrating. So they keep a steady food supply. Carnivores don't always. They don't necessarily eat, especially big carnivores that have to take down big animals. Smaller, little lizards eating bugs and stuff like that, or smaller, monkeys that are eating, insects and lizards. They're eating, a whole bunch of little things as they go. But bigger predators, hunting bigger game, they don't necessarily get a kill every day. Lions have less than a 50% success rate, far less than 50% success rate in some areas for hunting. So they're not able to successfully hunt every day, and so it may be once every few days or maybe once a week that they eat. Same for other predators. So they have to be able to concentrate that bile, because they need a week's worth of fat in one go, right? Because they can't just, if they're just spilling out this bile and it's just getting wasted and just reabsorbed, then they're not going to be able to absorb as much fat. They're just going to get loose stools. And that fat's going to be wasted. It can't be wasted. That is so important for the life and health of that animal, including us. And so it concentrates and concentrates and concentrates, and we just not eating fat because we're being told that, oh, you eat fat, you get fat. And so we're avoiding it. And what happens if anybody's ever taken chemistry, what happens to any hyper concentrated solution at rest? It forms precipitate, it forms crystals. That's what bile sludge is. That's what gallstones are. It's the solidification and crystallization of the bile. It's, oh, you're eating too much cholesterol, it's just being forced into your body. No, bile is made out of cholesterol. It's supposed to be made out of cholesterol. It's sitting there and concentrating so that you can have it available for when you get your kill. But if you're going months or years eating next to no fat, that's a problem. And there are probably some people that are more predisposed to it. Maybe they concentrate it past 20-fold, and past a certain point, it's going to just turn solid. That's just how that works. It's a state change. That's chemistry. And so if you're eating enough fat, as in as much fat as your body has bile for, it is physically impossible to ever form gallstones. And so that's because you will never have any bile sitting in your gallbladder for more than 24 hours. And it takes way more than 24 hours to form gallstones. And so even if you were someone that in 24 hours you'd have gallstones, as long as you ate fatty meat every day, you're never going to have a chance, because it's not going to be in your gallbladder in the first place to concentrate and turn into stones. It's not possible. And so when we look at gallstones, we teach this in medical school that the 4 Fs, or the demographic that we most commonly see gallstones and in people. It can happen in anybody, but it most commonly happens in female 40s fertile fat. And so what is that? That's a woman, a
Mm.
middle-aged woman who's just had a couple kids, has a bit of extra baby weight, wants to lose it, and is told, if you want to lose fat, you have to stop eating fat. So they stop eating fat, and they're really starving themselves and trying to, not eat anything and not eat any fat so that they can lose fat. And then all of a sudden that's miserable and horrible and not sustainable. And then they go back to eating normal food that their body is craving, because you have to have fat, is required for life, and animal fats specifically. And then you go back to that, and all of a sudden oh gosh, I have this pain, and you go to the doctor, and they say, oh, you got gallstones, and it says because you've been eating too much fat. It's like, no, actually, it's because they haven't been eating any fat. And in fact, you see this in bariatric surgery patients. There's a
Mm.
much higher rate of gallstones and cholecystectomies, which is the removal of the gallbladder, in patients who have undergone bariatric surgery, for a gastric sleeve or a bypass or something like that. And what is told and taught is that, well, something strange happens and changes metabolically when we lose a large amount of weight in one go. So, that's why that's such a nothing answer. And you would not believe how many nothing answers there are in medicine. I mean, I'm on the inside of it. So it sounds good to a patient. Well, something changes metabolically. So like, well, they're a doctor, so they understand what those metabolic changes are. And they just don't want, they don't want to explain it to me because it's too complicated. Nope. No, they have no idea. There's absolutely nothing. It's pure guess. It's there's no actual science behind. Oh, well, this changes and that. No, no idea. It's a blind guess, but it sounds good, and it gets them out of the room, and gets them on with their day, and so people say it, and then it gets taught to the next generation, and oh well, there's something going on. Okay, but what is it? No idea. They can't say that. They can't answer that. But something happens. Okay, fine. What I think happens is not that they've lost a lot of weight, how they've lost a lot of weight. These are people that are extremely highly motivated. They're willing to go into the doctor and the surgeon, become mutilated, and have very serious long-term health problems as a result of getting this gastric bypass or sleeve. And some of them, 10, 15 years down the line, they can have very serious issues and need resurgeries. Some people have other sorts of problems, then they need resurgeries right then and there, different complications from the surgeries. They can get stenosis, excessive scarring. They can close off, so they can't actually empty their stomach at all now. And they have to get resurgery to open that up and get rid of the scar tissue. It's horrible, horrible, horrible stuff. And I've seen people that had these complications, and it said, well, I never would have done it if I knew this could have happened. It's like, they literally told you this could have happened, but you just don't think that it's going to happen to you, unfortunately. But they can. These are it's rare, but they very serious complications do happen. And either way, you are mutilating yourself. And some people are so desperate to lose weight that they're willing to do that, which I think is a very very sad state. It's a very difficult position for people to be in, and deserves a lot of sympathy. And honestly, I think they're being taken advantage of, just not necessarily like because the doctors are saying, "Ooh, I'm going to get you," but because they're just not being told the right information, and they're getting having to go down this route when really it should be they just eat a natural human diet. They shouldn't have these problems. And so when you have people like that, and they have much higher rates of issues with their gallbladder, I think that's why, because they're so willing to do that. They're willing to do anything, and they're going to be so rigid with what they're told. Don't eat fat. Okay, I'm not eating any fat. I'm getting my surgery. I'm doing this, and I'm losing weight. God damn it! And I'm just going to not eat any fat. I'm going to barely eat anything. I'm just going to eat, twigs and berries, and that's it. And then they lose a lot of weight because they're starving themselves. And
Mm.
when you starve, anyone can starve themselves into a smaller dress size. Everyone knows that, but it's not sustainable. It's not healthy. It's the concentration camp diet. Like, you can do it, but it's not good for you, and it will have long-term ramifications if you do. And you'll gain the weight back. You yo-yo diet, and your metabolism shuts down, because your body's saying, we're in a famine, we need to protect against this famine. And then when you eat anything, it just goes right into fat, because you have to store that because you're in a famine, and so you need to store as much as you can and not use anything. And so you regain the weight and you yo-yo diet. But when people are doing this, I mean, I've seen people on these these wards that come in, when I'm on my general surgery, when I was on general surgery rotations, for instance, like when I first came to Australia, and we saw these women that were in there with gallbladder issues, and they had just gotten bariatric surgery, and it's something like 40% will get gallstones and have to get their gallbladders removed. It's a pretty wild number, and I think it's something like that. I don't know the exact number, so don't quote me, but um, this one lady in particular, she was really upset by this. And she was saying, no, I don't have gallstones. Can't possibly be. And so we did the scans and everything like that. We showed that, yeah, no, you do. And you have like, obstructing stone and all this sort of stuff. And, we need to do surgery. And she was said, look, I need some time to process this because I I was sure that I couldn't have gallstones because people were told that it comes from eating fat. You eat fat and cholesterol, and that turns into these stones in your body. And that's what we're told. And she said, I was convinced that I couldn't have gallstones because I have not eaten any fat in over 3 months. I have not eaten any fat. And so I just, like, how the hell can I have gallstones? Well, it's because she didn't eat any fat. And they're even more highly motivated to lose weight than the normal person. And they are going to just eat no fat. They aren't going to eat any fat. And those are the ones getting gallstones. If you already have gallstones, sometimes the horse is out of the barn. It's too late to shut the door. But if you just have sludge or their stones are small enough, yeah, you can pass them. And people have, they've reported this anecdotally that they've had sort of symptomatic pains and that has resolved with a high fat diet. High fat, it could be high fat any diet, but obviously a carnivore diet is a high fat diet. And but that just gets things moving, and you start moving this stuff, and you get more bowel motility, and you're moving this stuff out, and you're just clearing the sludge. And if you have a big enough stone that it gets caught, you're going to need help. You're going to need surgery or procedure like an ERCP going down your throat to go in and snake the drain and get that stone out of there, so you don't have that blockage, because that's very dangerous, life threatening to have a obstruction of your common bile duct, and or even your pancreatic duct, pancreatitis and things like that. That's a cause of pancreatitis, is that gallstone getting stuck at the sphincter of Oddi. It's another sphincter, and so it could reverse that if you're at a reversible stage. But there is sort of a point of no return. You have a big, massive stones that just aren't going to pass. And while it's not out of the question that they could sort of dissolve and get smaller and smaller and eventually go away, we don't have any direct evidence of that. But if they are small enough and they can pass, then this will pass them. It may be that you have big enough gallstones and you have a problem, you have an obstruction, and you end up needing a gallbladder resection and cholecystectomy. But again, you only know if you try it and you find out. And if you don't eat any fat, you're definitely going to need your gallbladder taken out eventually, because those stones are only going to grow. They're not going to get smaller, that's for sure.
You have no idea, but you just explained my life.
Oh yeah.
After Biggest Loser, I had gastric bypass and I followed it to a T, and I ended up with all the sludge, and they're like, "We don't know why that's there." They could never give me an answer why I had sludge. But
Yeah.
I don't have any of that pain anymore at all. It's
Good.
completely gone. So
Yeah.
I feel like there's more gallbladders that can be saved, and it seems like they're real quick to get rid of the useless organ.
Yeah, it's a very useful organ,
It's a
and
very
it's there for a
useful organ.
reason, and
Mhm.
it's there on purpose. Like, it's not vestigial, it's not just there hanging out doing nothing. It does a very important job, which is concentrate and preserve your bile so that you can get enough fat when you have access to it, and that's very important, because that is a very important nutrient.
Well, Dr. Chaffee, we only got through like 3 of my questions.
Yeah.
These were such good answers. This was such a good episode. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate all your time and all your information. If
Mhm.
you like this show, please like, subscribe, and share, and have a great day. Thank you. Bye.